Good afternoon, my conscious co-creators. Welcome to another edition of the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. I am very, very pleased you are all here with me today. We have another wonderful show in store for you today with a fascinating guest. I hope you'll stick around for it. But first, of course, we have my blog post from a couple of years ago. And this one, kind of a different one. This one is entitled Self-Reliant Individuals Make Self-Reliant Communities. As human beings, we are social creatures. We live together, work together, and relax together. One of our greatest strengths is our ability to work as a team. Yet the team is only as strong as the individual. There is a balance that we all search for, a balance between our commitment to ourselves and to our community, to our families and our partner, and maybe to ourselves. It is important for us to learn to work together, to help each other and to support each other. Learning to rely on each other is also a skill, one that can take us far if we are relying on the right people. While there is nothing wrong with relying on other people, sometimes we must learn to rely on ourselves, to figure things out for ourselves, and to do things by ourselves. Learning how to fix something simple or build something with our own hands is not just a valuable skill. The process of being able to maintain things by ourselves also builds our confidence. We are literally showing ourselves that we are competent, that we can handle life, and that we are able to survive. This may not seem that important for people living in big cities or large communities, yet the people who are self-reliant, even in the middle of an urban area, are sought out for their skills, especially when there is an unexpected event or a natural disaster. Life will not always be cozy and safe for us. Indeed, life is becoming more and more challenging in so many ways. When we learn to be the person that others rely on to help them, we can contribute greatly. Not that we will never rely on other people. We will all need to rely on another when we age. Yet if we can find within us the resources to face any challenge that may come our way, we will surely thrive and prosper. And when we as individuals prosper, the community prospers as well. Being self-reliant is not a reason to cut ourselves off from others. Instead, it is quite the opposite. The more self-reliant we are, the more we can connect with others through our service. So, a couple of years ago, we took a little time and we did some house sitting out in Colorado, and we stayed at this woman's house who was not who was in her 70s. She was an older woman. She had actually built the house with her husband, or at least they had added on to it. It was originally a little small piece, and they kept had putting on additions. And her husband had passed away. I think it had been 6 or 7 years before. And it was on top of a mountain, up a dirt road, probably about a mile from the paved road. And my wife and I were just fascinated at how self-reliant this woman was. How she took care of everything. She took care of the grounds, and it was, on top of a mountain. She had acres of property on the top of the mountain. The nearest neighbor was about half a mile down the dirt road. And it was such a different way of living than what we're used to in New York City, where we're surrounded by people. and where like and I know people in my apartment building who, something goes wrong with any little electrical device, plumbing, phone, whatever, I'm usually the one they ask for help. And so I was just reflecting on sort of this balance because it also had been something I felt was in the public conversation a bit more about being self-reliant. And I felt that there was this point which I think people tend to miss when they talk about self-reliance, where they talk about, you know, not having to rely on anybody else and being able to do things yourself and all this stuff. And we live in society. We live in a culture. We live with other people. And being self-reliant, it's a very valuable skill. And as I said in the post, it's really about showing us that we're competent, showing ourselves that we're competent. It builds our confidence. It builds our internal emotional muscles. But self-reliant does not mean isolated. And that's the thing I think sometimes confused is they think if you're self-reliant, then you don't need anybody else. Then you can live off on your own and not interact with other people. And I kind of feel that they're missing the point, and it's actually the exact opposite. That living in communities need self-reliant people. Communities need people who know how to do different things. And maybe one person is good at the plumbing and another person is good at the electricity and someone else is good at growing things and someone else is good at cooking things. And we can all bring our different talents. And just because we know how to do a lot of things doesn't mean we do a lot of things well. So I felt called at the time to write this blog post. And in some ways this is, I think, very timely with what just happened in Texas. I think it highlights there are more and what's happened over the last year or two with all the natural disasters we've been experiencing in the United States and around the world that, who knows when a hurricane, a tornado, a earthquake, a flood, when something is going to hit that's going to knock out our power and knock out our means of how we normally do things. So knowing how to survive, knowing how to be self-reliant when the things we typically rely on are no longer there, I kind of feel like is a skill that more and more and more of us need to develop as time goes on. Because right now, there is absolutely no indication that the weather is going to get any less extreme anytime soon. As a matter of fact, all the evidence, all the science, all the data points to it getting more extreme. So the more extreme the weather gets, that stresses on the whole system of how society functions and works. And so for me, this blog post is a call for us to create self-reliant communities where we are right here, right now, today. And look, I'm a native New Yorker. I've lived here my whole life. I know a lot of people who've moved out of New York in the last 5, 10 years and moving other places. It doesn't matter where you live. Doesn't matter if it's in a big city or in the countryside or in the suburbs. It might just behoove us all to learn a new skill, to learn something that we can use to help ourselves and help the community at large should something happen. And I'm not predicting that anything is going to happen in my community or your community. but how much more internal safety would you have if you knew you were competent at something should things suddenly fall apart for whatever reason? I'm not saying we should all be doomsday preppers. I'm not saying we should be survivalists. I'm not saying, you should grow a vegetable garden in your apartment, but maybe just learn something. Take better care of your house plants so you know how to grow things in general. Maybe sprouts. I know a lot of people love to sprout things in their apartments. If you have a backyard and you have some land, maybe try growing something. Nowadays, information is readily available all over the internet. Maybe look for some videos on how do you change a pipe or a faucet or a light switch. Look, don't do anything unsafe. I'm not telling you to go and rewire your whole house. I'm just saying maybe if enough of us learn some skill that would serve us if things suddenly weren't the way they are today, there are enough of us that we can rely on each other. We don't have to know everything, but if we all know a piece of something, that makes for a very strong community. So that's my blog post for today. Title again is Self-Reliant Individuals Make Self-Reliant Communities. And of course, you can always find my blog post on theconsciousconsultant.com as well as on talkradio.nyc/blog. All right. And now it is my extreme pleasure to welcome to the show former professional baseball player, nonprofit leader, attorney, and nationally recognized advocate for ethical non-monogamy, Leon Feingold. Leon has gained widespread attention for his TEDxBushwick talk on polyamory, where he shared his personal journey and challenged societal norms around love, intimacy, and relationship structures. His talk has inspired thousands to explore polyamory with greater compassion, honesty, and emotional intelligence. Leon is the co-founder of the polyamory support group Open Love NY and the House of Good Deeds, a nonprofit dedicated to altruism through mutual aid, sustainability, and community empowerment. His work recently earned him the title of New Yorker of the Week by NY1 for using love and generosity to build a kinder world. Currently, Leon is writing a book that blends philosophy, personal narrative, and practical guidance on polyamory, compersion, and inclusive relationship ethics. The book is slated for release on Valentine's Day next year and will offer a fresh perspective on how love can be both expansive and deeply intentional. Welcome to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Leon.
Thanks for having me, Sam. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Me as well. Me as well. Um, uh, I have so many questions for you. Just before we need to take a quick break in a minute, but I'm just curious, do you have a working title for your book yet?
I do. Always being a fan of watching Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, I like the idea of experts sharing their advice. So one of the working titles is Poly Smarts for Amorous Hearts.
Okay. Um, and I'm just curious, would you say like you've always looked at things in society from a different perspective? Or was this idea of embracing something that very much goes against our societal norms, was this something that kind of came later in life for you?
I think I always grew up looking at society from the outside in. I mean, obviously, after the break, we'll talk about it a lot more, but
Yeah.
I think living through some experiences myself really changed or shaped the way that I look at relationships. And it made all of a sudden like a switch just flipped. And all of a sudden, the concept of polyamory made so much sense for me. And I learned that it might make sense for others as well.
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, great. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about your journey a bit more. some of the challenges that you faced along the way, what you discovered, what you learned that supported this idea, and we'll see where the conversation goes from there. Okay.
Excellent.
Awesome. So everyone, please stay tuned. You're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. My guest this hour is Leon Feingold, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
And welcome back to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. We're speaking this hour with Leon Feingold. So, Leon, first thing I got to ask you, you're a former professional baseball player. I never asked you, what team did you play for?
At the time, we were called the Cleveland Indians. I was in their system for 2 years, but I played professionally for 6 seasons, including 2 with the Atlantic League and 2 with the Baseball League.
Oh, nice, nice, nice. And how come you stopped playing?
My brain was willing, my shoulder was not.
Ah, yes, the spirit is willing, but the body is weak.
Something like
Yeah. Um, and so what sort of brought you to this idea of polyamory? What brought you to this idea of looking at relationships from a completely different way than traditional society looks at them?
I always grew up sort of awkward. I was always the weird kid. I was smart. I skipped first grade because I already was reading in pre-K. Like I was always so like I was advanced with my brain, but socially not so much. So I always felt like an outsider. I mean, I think at some point most kids in elementary school feel to some extent like outsiders. It's not till much later till we find our people, we find our way to fit in.
Yeah,
But there's a lot of peer pressure on kids to fit in, to go to any lengths at all to avoid standing out. And
right.
it isn't until we go through college, we come into ourselves that we understand the value of standing out. In fact, the importance of standing out. But when you're a young kid and everyone's trying to be, to fit in or be teased or be pressured into being like everyone else, most kids don't learn. I mean, teaching kids about sex, teaching kids about
Yeah,
relationship, teaching kids about like adult topics is kind of hard to come by unless you're very lucky and you have great parents, great guardians, great mentors.
yeah,
So I
absolutely.
think I grew up on the outside looking in. I was very awkward. I never had a conversation with a girl till I was out of high school, pretty much.
Mm,
So I watched all these other kids and people having relationships, and it always seemed slightly off. The concept of the expectations of like, how are you supposed to ever meet one person who is everything you could possibly want? And
right.
that never really made sense to me, even as a young adult. And then I met a woman named Beth on an OkCupid dating site. This is back when it first started.
Mm,
They stuck me in with the IQ test, and I used that as my dating pool. And I met this girl named Beth who described herself as polyamorous. I said, I know the Greek and Roman roots that many loves, but what does that mean? What does that look like? She said, well, you and I are going to go out and have dinner on Saturday while my boyfriend is having a date at our apartment. I was like, wait, what? How does that work? How can you do it? So over dinner, she explained the concept of how their relationship works. And every polyamorous relationship is slightly different. It basically allows you to substitute what I call the relationship Bible for the choose your own adventure version. You get to decide what a relationship looks like. And understanding that this not only was possible, but worked and worked really well for this couple made me realize that the expectations I had of, looking for that one person to be happy with forever, while it might work well for some people, fewer than anyone thinks, I believe.
Yeah.
But the idea that it could work and work sustainably and make people happier going forward was really exciting to me. And the more I learned about it, the more I got excited about the concept of polyamory. And within a few months, I was volunteering with the local polyamory group. I actually founded one called Open Love New York. And it actually became the largest polyamory support group on the East Coast of New York. So I guess something right. But at any rate, it kind of triggered this growth in me to the point where I identify as polyamorous, and I've shared my thoughts with, at this point, millions of people.
Yeah. Yeah. I several years ago, I interviewed a filmmaker by the name of Roger Nygaard, and he did a sort of a documentary style movie called The Truth About Marriage, where he explored all kinds of different aspects of marriage, including alternate kinds of relationships. And I just remember, because something you said, I just remember that there was this one couple, one polyamorous couple that he interviewed, and it was actually two women. And one woman was saying, we're not needs machines. It's not like you put a quarter in and you get a need out from us. We all have different needs, and all these different needs, you're never going to find them in just one person. And that it kind of makes sense to like look towards different people for finding what you want out of a relationship and not just one person. And from what I understand, there have been a number of books written about it. Sapiens, Sex at Dawn, a lot of books that sort of explored the roots of relationships. And from what I remember reading about, they said that way back when we were just hunter-gatherers, that this whole idea of one person to one person marriage didn't exist. And that like you had small tribes and like everyone sleeping with everyone, and the children was everyone's tribes, right?
Yeah, I mean, actually, one of my favorite books was, in fact, Sex at Dawn. Chris Ryan and his wife, whose name, unfortunately, I cannot pronounce, just Silt. Oh, God, I'm so sorry. So I actually was invited to speak alongside them at South by Southwest several years ago.
Ah,
Uh, it was a really compelling explanation about societally why humans are not inherently monogamous, why we use it effectively as a demonstration of our devotion to someone that we love. In short, I think of it for most people as agreeing to tie your offhand behind your back. So tie your left hand behind your back as proof of my dedication to you, my monogamous partner, and I expect you to tie your hand behind your back. We can still live our lives, just won't get everything we want. We won't be as comfortable. We won't get to do the things we want to do. But you'll know that I'm committed to you, and I'll know that you're committed to me. And for some people, that sort of metaphorical demonstration is valuable and important. But for someone like me, and for, unfortunately, I think most people, including those who are monogamous but feeling something missing, the idea of sacrificing a need or a want in order to prove devotion is counterproductive to being happy. And I think the best relationships, are ones that make everyone involved happy.
yeah,
And it's honestly that simple.
yeah, yeah. I'm curious, what brought you to be so passionate about this topic that you actually did a TEDx talk on it?
Um, I think once I realized how much the concept of polyamory applied to me and made me basically created a sea change in my brain to understand that what I'd been taught was not necessarily the way things were, particularly for me and for others. It made me want to share that knowledge with others. My goal is not to make people polyamorous. My goal is to make
Mhm.
people aware of polyamory. And I think
Mm.
through the book, through the TED Talk, through the appearances on you know, movies and press, um, it's something that I've been very proud to say that I've really opened up or I've been part of a movement in opening up some eyes. Remember, 15 years ago, 20 years ago when we started this, nobody really knew what polyamory was.
Right.
Or if they thought it was some weird key swapping throwback to the 1960s free love movement.
Yeah.
They didn't realize that it was something which was actively, a workable, sustainable blueprint for healthy relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I always find it so curious that some of the greatest stories that had tragic endings, had polyamory been an acceptable part of society at the time, those tragic endings wouldn't be tragic endings.
Absolutely. Every
Right.
Shakespearean play would have had a happy ending.
Right. Or like the tale of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. If
Mhm.
Guinevere and Lancelot and King Arthur did their thing and everyone was okay with it, would have been fine. Uh, um, I'm curious, how long ago did you do your TEDx talk?
It was 2016, so
Oh,
less than 10 years ago, but not much less.
I did my TEDx talks 2016 as well. That's pretty funny.
Oh,
Yeah. I'm curious. Mine was on consciousness, though, not on
it's
polyamory.
hardly surprising.
Uh, what kind of response did you get from the TEDx talk initially?
It was initially hosted not on TEDx. There's a procedure that goes with TEDx talks, which obviously you know, but your
Yeah.
listeners may not. It doesn't get hosted immediately on YouTube. It doesn't get immediately hosted on the TEDx channel. We did ours at an organization called Livestream. It was hosted on their own website, and we had um, a couple 100,000 views within the first several months, and then it transitioned
Oh,
to YouTube and TEDx. So I'm up to, I think, over 500,000 views on this talk alone.
nice.
Um, the responses have been uniformly exactly what I was hoping for. A lot of people are really excited about it. A lot of people have questions, which is completely legitimate.
Hmm.
Um, but the amount of eyes that have been opened and the questions that have been back and forth are really heartening to me. I really love the idea of sharing knowledge and being a resource, whether in my personal life or writ large.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful, wonderful. We just got a minute or so before our next break. Because I do want to talk about the challenges. But before we get there, we mentioned Sex at Dawn. Are there any other sources, books, materials, movies that you've seen that that you use for educating yourself that really helped you to understand this whole idea better?
There's no shortage of books on polyamory. More Than Two is one of the more well-known ones. I think it's by Tristan Taormino. I could be mistaken on that though. There's a lot of really well-known sex-positive writers. The Ethical Slut by Betty Dodson and Dossie Easton is one of the seminal books in the concept of ethical non-monogamy. It's a little outdated, but it was massive when it came out. And of course, there's all sorts of research from the Kinsey Institute. One of my colleagues in the sex positive education world, Dr. Zhana Varangalova, has an online podcast of sorts. She's also a professor at NYU studying human sexuality. It is wonderful to have
Mm.
so many resources. But as far as I know, there's no real book doing what Polly Smarts for Amorous Hearts promises to do, which is sort of using what the polyamory sphere has to teach and specifically targeting a non-poly, generic, vanilla, quote unquote, normal, uh,
Mm.
accessible to everyone book. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really focused on writing.
Cool. Cool. All right. So I want to talk about your upcoming book after the break, but I also want to talk first about some of the challenges. Like what have been some of the struggles, some of the things that made it difficult, and and yeah, like just what are some of the things that it's good to be aware of? Because sometimes when people hear a concept like this, oh, I think it's great, and they jump into it and they realize, oh, it's not quite as easy as it sounds, is it? So
That's probably true. I
yeah.
think if you have good mentors and you're part of a supportive community, you get disabused of some of the incorrect notions very quickly.
Yeah.
If you don't live in an area, you don't have access to mentors, you don't really know what you're doing, you may think it's great getting what you want, but you have to understand it's not, as you say, it's not that simple. It's not as easy as just opening up a relationship and everything works great. If you're on the same page as your partner or
Hmm.
partners,
Hmm.
everything will work well. In fact, one of the
Hmm.
biggest lessons of the TED Talk was that love is easy, compatibility is hard. Um,
Ah.
love with each other if they allow themselves to, just like Hollywood says, it's actually true. All you need is an opportunity and vulnerability. Those
Mm.
are literally the only two things you need to fall in love with somebody. But
Beautiful.
love is not enough to make a relationship work. It
Yeah.
really, really isn't. And in fact, being in love with somebody with whom you're incompatible is a red flag, because if you keep having problems, you keep hitting the same wall again and again, and you only can stay in the relationship and move past an issue by ignoring it or by punting it down the road, that's that's a red flag. And
Yeah.
if you're not compatible, if any, and no matter how many people are in relationships, each of them is made up of multiple dyads. So if there's a
Mm.
monogamous relationship, it's two people. If there's a polyamorous triad, then it's three relationships, because A would B to C, C to A.
Yeah.
Um, the whole point is to make sure that everybody matches, everybody's needs and wants fit. And if they don't fit all of them, the idea is that everyone is a puzzle piece. Everyone, can match other people in certain ways. And if you
Mm.
only connect with somebody in a sexual manner, it is okay as long as everyone's on the same page and your relationship fits the grand scale, the big picture. It's
Mm.
okay to have a sexual relationship with somebody.
Mm.
'Cause, you know, a, a, if you love opera and you find somebody who loves opera and also loves going with you to the animal shelter to feed animals, like whatever you into, just find the
Right.
matches, just find
Right.
the places where your plugs match. And if you can build that into a relationship that is respectful of each other's relationships, it's really you're building connections in ways that make everybody happy. It sort of takes the expectation of one partner being everything physical, intimate, tactile, sexual,
Hmm.
uh, romantic with each
Hmm.
other, and it kind of splits it up. You don't have to. If you find somebody who matches you in all those important ways, that's beautiful and that's amazing, and go for it. But if you can find those pieces and match them up with different people in ways that is respectful to everyone else's needs and everyone else's relationships, it's beautiful. It's like a complex engine that has so many different parts that work well together. The possibilities are endless, as opposed to somebody who may very well only want one or two pieces in their
Hmm.
little relationship machine. And if that works for them, then great. But as somebody who craves variety and craves new experiences and craves connection with people,
Hmm.
being able to live in a healthy way while developing relationships with different people over different things, and to be honest, polyamory is not usually about sex.
Yeah.
Sex variety is more important to me than sex.
Hmm.
But sexual variety is obviously important for many people, especially when, according to social taboos, it's forbidden. And of
Yeah.
course, we
Yeah.
all know what happens when you tell somebody not to do something, especially if it's
Yeah.
human. You want it. You do
Right.
things. You make poor decisions in order to get it. So there's a
Mm.
whole lot there to talk about.
Yeah. Okay,
But
let's leave it there for the
we'll
moment. We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue on about the challenges and maybe give some pointers to our audience and let's get into your book, okay?
absolutely. Thanks.
All right. Everyone, please stay tuned. You're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, and we'll be right back in just a moment.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time right here on talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I'm Linda Marcanico. The A Train to Sedona is a memoir about my journey to love and compassion. It's also the name of my new broadcast on Wednesdays at 12 noon. When we are spiritual, we embrace possibilities and ideas, which strengthen our mind, body, spirit, health, and wisdom. On the A Train to Sedona broadcast, I plan to interview guests who embrace these expansive practices. Join us on Wednesdays at 12 noon on Talk Radio New York City.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
So back when I was in college, I believe, or it might have been right after college, I remember going down to a science fiction convention in Atlanta. And I was walking around the dealer's room, and there were different, dealers selling stuff. And there was this guy with two women behind one uh, table, and they were selling different handcrafts and other things, art stuff. And I struck up a conversation with him, and he's like, "Oh, this is my wife and this is my lover." And I'm like, "What?" I said, "Wow." And we started talking about it. And I go, "That must be a lot of work." And he said, "Oh my God, you have no idea."
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that people tend to gloss over when they hear about this idea of, oh, open relationship, polyamory, I can see whoever I want, is that relationships, even good relationships, are a lot of work. They normally don't just happen, and it's not like you can just show up and do anything. Like, relationships are like plants. You got to water them, you got to fertilize them, you got to make sure they get enough sun. And so I'm just curious, like, for yourself, what has been in your own relationships, what's been the most work or the most challenge around really cultivating a conscious polyamorous relationship?
I think in the general, I'll answer the question about me in a moment, but I think in general, it must have been, years ago, extremely difficult to not only maintain healthy relationships, ethically non-monogamous relationships with multiple partners, dealing with each other's personalities and needs and wants, but also dealing with constant social pressure.
Yeah.
I feel like for every issue that especially families have within themselves, they have 10 more from people outside who look at them and say, you can't do that. It's not appropriate, whether it's work or school or peer groups. Basically, every interaction you have, as soon as you have that conversation, as soon as you say, this is my wife, this is my lover, I mean, obviously they've gotten to the point where they were comfortable enough to say that even, decades ago. But I think it can be very draining, having to explain yourself again and again. And I think anyone can understand that. For me, however, living in, 2025, where it has, through no small part of, me a little bit, but like the titans in the ethical non-monogamous world, ranging from like, Esther Perel and Dr. Ruth, and just like so many people that are acknowledging and respecting the validity of ethical non-monogamy. I think it's much easier, and it's back to the way it should be for the most part, which is the issues you have in your relationships come from within the relationships mostly. That's not to say there's still not major swaths of this country and this planet that are still extremely, for lack of a better word, conservative / regressive when it comes to polyamory or ethical non-monogamy. But I mean, in your open, you talked about living in a major metropolis like New York. I mean, this is one of the most liberal cities in the world outside Black Rock City at Burning Man.
Yeah.
So the idea, speaking of radical self-reliance,
Yeah.
so if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. Well, that applies to relationships too. I mean, everyone here is extremely, not everyone, more than most places. New York is a very liberal, accepting, educated, you do you kind of place. So I think living here for me, the biggest challenges I've found in polyamory are simply just finding and developing compatible relationships.
Yeah.
Because the more compatible you are, the less effort is needed to put in. I mean, if two people were, and again, this is just hypothetical, perfectly compatible, they both wanted exactly the same things from each other, not mirroring, but matching each other. Very important. If your needs are being met by your relationship and you being yourself is matching your partner's wants and needs, whether that's singular or plural is irrelevant, then you don't have to have any additional troublesome communication other than, pass the milk at the
Yeah.
breakfast table. Like simple, it's really that simple. So yes, it's like tending to a garden, but if you're raising a pet rock, you don't really have to do that much. And the best relationships are pet rocks.
Uh,
Probably put that in the book. Maybe it's a cactus. Maybe it's a cactus. You still need to check in. You still need to every once in a while say, "Hey, how are things? Are we okay? Is everything good?" But if you're really a good match with the person or people you're dating, everything really can go so smoothly. You think you're dreaming. I mean, each of us either know or have known or have known of people who are in relationships, no matter what their structure, monogamous or otherwise, where they just seem to fit together so well. Now, seeming to fit together so well can sometimes be a facade, but there are people who just match each other so well. They glow, they're happy. At least for any given moment, people may be optimally paired with each other, and it's
Right.
beautiful. So I'm just really excited to intentionally and happily build relationships with people who match me and vice versa.
Now, just because you believe in ethical non-monogamy doesn't mean you don't believe in marriage, does it?
No, not at all. I just got married a couple months ago, and I was married once before. Unfortunately, my wife passed away, which is
Yeah.
a whole other podcast in and of itself. It's how we founded the House of Good Deeds to pay forward the help that we received when my wife was sick. In fact, one of the people who was among the most supportive when my wife was sick was my current wife. She and I have been together for 9 years, and my wife only passed away 8 years ago. So I was actually dating my current wife at the time before my first wife got sick. Before we got sick, and we were all supportive of each other. And that's, to be honest, and this is a little off the conversational path, but I do not understand how monogamous people can survive emotionally the loss, the death of a loved one without the network of support provided by, multiple people. And in a polyamorous relationship, the people that were the most supportive were my partners, her partner, our friends, our lovers, our families came together to provide support. And you don't need a tragedy to have that. I practice what's called kitchen table poly. The idea is everyone can just, my partners, your partners, our friends can all sit together at a kitchen table, and some of us make food, some of us clean up, and everyone, they don't have to be intimate with each other, but they can all be on the same team. And visualizing that has been really helpful for me.
Wow. Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. One of the things about polyamory that to me I thought made a lot of sense was if you just have two people together in a relationship, you only have in some sense the resources of two people. But if you have a third person, a fourth person, a fifth person, a sixth person in an intimate relationship together that are all committed to each other, now you've exponentially increased the resources. And by resources, I don't just mean money. I mean like people who can be there if someone's sick, people who can be there to watch the kids if you can't watch the kids, people who can be there for each other in the best and worst of times. To me, it just seemed like it made sense from just a pure point of view of support, of having that kind of a close, tight-knit support network.
That's because it does make sense.
Yeah. All right, we got to take one last break. When we come back, just let's talk about the book. Where are you with the book? Who are you writing the book for? What do you feel people can expect from the book, and what's your hope for the book? Okay.
Looking forward to it.
All right. So everyone, please stay tuned. You're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. We've been speaking this hour to Leon Feingold, and we'll be right back in just a moment.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Ready to serve up success with a splash? Hi, I'm Bruce Kramer, a.k.a. the Corporate Cockroach.
I'm the Renaissance woman, Angie Snowball.
And I'm your strategy doctor, Dr. Navtesh Dessange, inviting you to serving up success with a splash.
Join us as we shake things up with real talk and real strategies centered around awareness, action, and accountability.
And yes, there really is a cocktail involved. Please join us and sip your way to success.
Serving up success with a splash, where wisdom meets happy hours. Cheers!
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 You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
So, Leon, once again, what's the working title for your book?
It's actually got a couple of titles. I'm actually looking at the manuscript and editing right now. Polysmarts for Amorous Hearts. And for anyone who's seen who's actually watched the TED Talk, there's a rather lengthy acronym at the end of it, which I don't want to ruin it, but it starts with MTINY. And the subtitle is Relationships Made Easy from A to MTINY. And I've already, in the preamble to the book, I've already written that if anyone has any comments or questions, I'll be including them in my follow-up book, which is MTINZ to Z, Relationships Still Made Easy. I also toyed with the idea of Polyamorist's Guide to the Universe, as I'm a massive fan of the Hitchhiker series.
Yeah.
And polyamory can teach everyone why polyamory can teach everyone about relationships based on the TED Talk on polyamory. So some mishmash of those, some combination of those is going to wind up on the book cover at some point.
Gotcha. And what is your intention behind the book? What are you hoping that the people who read the book are going to get out of it?
I was invited to do this TED Talk by a friend of mine who was one of the forces behind bringing TEDx to Bushwick. And she said, you should definitely, she was not polyamorous, but she was a member of Mensa with me, actually. She really liked the idea of sharing knowledge and disseminating it beyond where it existed, basically finding new ways to spread information. And she said, you would be a great TED speaker. And I had really just learned about TED at the time. This is, like I said, almost 10 years ago. And one thing led to another. I gave the TED Talk, and I really liked the idea of taking the information that I had inside and finding a way to share it. So I think a book does the same thing exponentially. Lots of people write TED Talks, but lots of people read books, including online books, audio books, things like that. So I think the idea was to take the educational power of the TED Talk and expand on it and share more of what information I have that I think others would want to know, and provide a resource for people who may not have access or may not have the opportunity to, learn about polyamory or learn about healthy relationships from a polyamorous perspective, in ways, especially if they are, they haven't already watched the talk, they haven't already found their people, but they still have questions.
Mm-hmm. So you've been involved in this movement, let's call it, for a while now. Have you seen there be a general change around the idea of ethical non-monogamy? Do you feel people are more open to the idea now than they were 10 years ago?
Massive. I mean, there's still plenty of recalcitrant people that, for whatever reason, either they were raised a certain way, or they are morally against it, or they believe it goes against their religion, or for whatever reason, they believe it is something they are not allowed to look at, they're not allowed to consider. And in fact, a lot of the people who are most upset, most vocal about opposing polyamory, are themselves the ones who are most unhappy in their existing relationships or their existing relationship structure,
Yeah.
which is, paralleling. And I've often said that, there were, a lot of strides towards there was women's suffrage, and then
Right.
there were race relations, and then there was homosexuality and the queer movements. So every generation has its own coming to terms or reckoning with human rights as opposed to social expectations. So I think polyamory is simply the next logical step where there's going to be pushback. But when people realize that it just simply makes sense, it has become more and more accepted.
Yeah. I think I saw an article somewhere that said that among younger people, especially like the 25 to 35-year-old crowd, that now there's like 10 to 15% identify as polyamorous, which is huge because like in the population in general, it's like 2 to 3%.
I think it's actually much larger. I think identifying is a keyword. I think a lot of people do not identify as polyamorous, but if you were to give people the question, if you were to structure the question differently and give people, for example, if you were to include the concept of a hall pass, like is there a celebrity or one person that you and your spouse would grant each other the ability, like it can look like anything. Of strict monogamy, much less prevalent than people think it is, even incorporating cheating, because obviously cheating is not ethical non-monogamy. It's basically unethical non-monogamy. Sorry, I just saw something funny.
Yeah.
The idea that people can choose relationship structures that work for them has been novel, and I think younger people are much less beholden to tradition. And we're seeing that with work. We're seeing that with the standards of what people are expected to do, and how Gen X, Gen Y, and now Gen Alpha are just doing away with that. And some people will say it's more selfish, which it is, but it's also giving people the chance to identify what matters for them and practice some form of authenticity. And from a relationship and a polyamorous perspective, authenticity, understanding what you need and being able to live and act on that is one of the most important things you can do. Because people can learn all they want about relationships and what they're supposed to do and how the people in their lives might interact. But until each of us learn what matters to us and kind of go past the social expectations, what other people, what our families expect of us, and really figure out what matters to us and why, which is crucial, we won't really know how to find the puzzle pieces that match us because we don't know what our own puzzle pieces look like.
What's been the biggest revelation about yourself that you've learned through your involvement in polyamory in general? Like what have you learned about yourself that you don't think you would have learned had you not opened up to this?
Oh, so much. I mean, I couldn't possibly sum it up. Just learning that I was polyamorous and learning that polyamory exists and is workable was a massive change of my life. I mean, I could have been unhappily married by now. I could have been, I mean, I think for me, learning that I was polyamorous and that polyamory existed is probably the single biggest change. And then, of course, learning that I had both the an amazing source of information, both from my own experiences and from the communities which I have been part of. That collective information is incredibly helpful and has helped me, has helped many, many other people. And I think learning that I have the ability and hopefully soon the platform to share this on a global stage is really impactful for me. So there's no really one way to sum up what I've learned about myself other than I have a message to share now, and I want to.
So it really speaks to your heart.
It does.
One last question before we start wrapping up. Are you hopeful that eventually governments, municipalities will start to recognize polyamorous relationships as the same way marriage is recognized as a relationship?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense from a certain perspective that you would want to restrict the benefits of marriage from a legal perspective in terms of inheritance, in terms of property ownership, in terms of rights to be able to see each other or make decisions for each other if they're incapacitated. I could see why insurance might get trickier, but these are all things that are going to have to change. They are changing elsewhere around the world. Canada has recognized three-way relationships. I think some countries like Brazil and other places have already. I really should be more up on that. But there are places. Unfortunately, our current presidency with Trump in the White House has become significantly more regressive for progressive causes. But I am hoping that's a blip rather than a future.
Yeah. Well, Leon, I really want to appreciate your honesty, your vulnerability, your willingness to come forward and come on the show and talk about this. I know, like, even though you've been involved with it a long time, it's still not necessarily an easy thing to get up and be public about it, because a lot of people might not be so happy with the fact that you're public about it. So thank you for coming on the show today.
I actually have, and I acknowledge, a lot of privilege. I don't have a vicious ex. I don't have a job that could fire me or punish me. I don't have people in my life. I can and do live openly polyamorous, and that is a form of privilege, just like beauty, just like money, just like anything else. It insulates me from the impact, which unfortunately many people do not have. They are at risk. They cannot be public about their desires. They cannot be public about their lifestyles, which is really sad. And I hope that as it becomes more and more accepted globally, and especially around the United States of America, more and more people will be empowered to be able to speak up and have authentic choices for their relationships rather than feel beholden to what other people expect of them.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Leon. I wish you the best. Let me know when the book comes out. And if I can squeeze you in, we'll get you back on the show once the book launches, okay?
Thank you. Well, listen, I'm 127,000 words in. All I got to do is edit it down and I'm golden.
There you go. And thank you, of course, my loyal listeners, for tuning in this week. And by the way, if you like this topic, next week, I've got a woman coming on who's did a TED Talk all about sex and money. So we're continuing the theme and about the relationship between sex and money, and it might not be what you think. So thank you all for tuning in. Take care. We will talk to you all next week.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.